today is a little bit more small scale than the rest of the talks that we've seen. So I'm going to talk about a single activity I did on a single day of class and how I gained inspiration from the FDI to make this activity better than what we were doing previously. So computer science intro classes have students from all across the curriculum. Most of the students that take our intro classes have no intention of being computer scientists. Instead, they're taking it because they think computer science will be useful to them. Their parents said it was high paying and it might be useful. Their professor said it might be good for their senior project or something. So we have a lot of people taking it with a lot of different interests. So I can't just start programming on day one because our students don't know it. So there's this very common exercise that the CS department does, and my colleagues do. I see them sitting in the audience here. On day one, we have this exercise where we have students write down a recipe for peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Okay, I think it's pretty straightforward. You can have a 6-year-old do it. Okay, but what we do is I have the students write it down in groups, and then we have them present it to me, and I try to follow it using actual bread and butter and peanut butter and jelly and so forth, and a knife and so forth. But I do it like a computer would, very literally. Okay, it's usually somewhat entertaining. When I put the peanut butter on the bread, I take the jar of peanut butter, I stack it on top of the bread, and not what they meant, but what they said, if I was very literally interpreting it. It's a fun exercise. It covers some basic concepts in computer science, but I've done it like 7, 8 times. It's kind of grown stale, kind of like the bread that's sitting in the drawer of my office. So I had the opportunity to do this Faculty Development Institute 2 summers ago, and I wanted to apply some of its techniques to try something new, particularly associated with this game development class. So here's what I've designed. So I have, here's my elevator pitch. It's called Game Design Telephone, right? And the idea is that it's sort of an homage to design thinking and the game telephone. So design thinking is a process for developing things that center on sort of what the consumer or the user wants. And the game telephone, I'm sure you remember it from many years ago, it's where you have a message, you whisper it to your neighbor whispers it to the next person, and it goes around the room, and by the time you get to the end, it sounds nothing like what you started with. Okay? So in this, I give the students in separate groups of 6, I give them the components to a board game, because I'm really into board games, so I have a lot of them. So I give them some board games, and I give them 20 minutes to come up with the rules for a game using the components that I've given them. I don't give them the rules to the existing game. I just say, here's the pieces, try to make a game out of it. And then what they do is they take their written rules, and they pass those written rules to the next group. And the next group tries to understand the rules, tries to interpret them, and tries to play the game. And then if they're able to get that far, they try to decide whether or not the game is any fun. Probably it's not, but maybe it's close to being fun. So what they do is revise it and they iterate on this process a little bit, and then they pass it back to the original group to sort of interpret what's happened to it. So they get to see sort of how their game has changed. They get to see what the group didn't understand about what they were saying or how their rules were vague or ambiguous or inconsistent. So they reflect on things like that, and then we come together and we discuss it all at once. It's sort of, and as we're doing this, I facilitate the conversation to focus on the learning outcomes and the ideas that I'm trying to get them to think about. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about sort of my thought process and what I eventually did with this assignment activity. You shouldn't imagine that you'll be able to copy it out of whole cloth because you're not, unless you're teaching game design, John, which maybe you can. But if you're anybody else, you might want to think about, maybe this could work in my class. Can it make students excited about my topic? Can it make students who know nothing about my topic get a sense of what the class will be like through the rest of term? Okay? And that's sort of my goal. So let me sort of step through some of my objectives here. So this is an educational institution, so I'll start with the learning objectives I have as a computer scientist. As a computer scientist, I'm interested in computational thinking. That's thinking about how computation's performed in the world, what models of computation are out there, how that evolves as the world continues to exist. Over here I have a picture of the board game I use. It's called Operation Flashpoint. I don't know if anybody's played it. It is a firefighting and fire rescue simulator. Okay, so the board is a square grid of a house here, and there's some little tokens of red fires and red smoke, and there's little firefighters over there in the corner. And the original rule of the game, there's rules for how the world evolves. So if there's a fire in one spot, it can grow to the next spot and so forth, and firefighters can put out fires and rescue people. So I don't give students any of this. But what I give them are the components, and I ask them to come up with a model of a game that they want to play with these components. So they need to come up with a computational model to express what's happening in this game, and they need to write down the rules of this model on a piece of paper so that someone else could understand what they're doing without being able to read their mind. Okay? As part of this, they need to practice expressing rules, just in a way that they would be expressing rules to a computer program. So they need to be unambiguous. They have only one way of coming out. They need to be consistent in that the rules don't conflict with each other. They need to be robust to uncertainty. So one thing I haven't told you is that I have a lot of copies of this game, but they're not all the same copy. So this one is a house, but one is a submarine, which has a much different layout and shape and structure. It has no external doors, for example, like this building does. So when they design the rules of the game, they have to be robust against differences in the components that they have. Another is this connection between mechanics, which are the rules of the game, the rules of the world, and what those cause to happen as the game is played. Okay? One of the most important dynamics of a game is that it's fun for the players. Okay? And you don't want to design a game that has great rules that look good on paper but are no fun to play. Okay? So the students need to experience that notion. They may look really good on paper, but it doesn't really make sense when you play it. A bunch of secondary learning objectives. Since this is the first class and this is an intro class, I'm really wanting to hook students in, think this is a cool thing to do, and get a sense of the kind of thinking that they'll be doing throughout term. I have a lot of students who have no experience in CS, so I don't want to start with a very hardcore programming activity because some students will have an advantage and some students won't. So I start with this level playing field, which is you can play a game, we can make rules of a game, and write them down in English. Okay? It's also a good icebreaker because the students are later on in class going to have to work on final projects and design games with each other in groups. So they're going to need to know each other and they're going to need to know me. And like any game, it should be fun. Okay? So the students they're looking at me. Well, this is from this term, they're doing it. They may be smiling because they're looking at me, but this person is not looking at me, Colleen, and she is smiling. So she's having fun, even though she didn't know I was taking a picture. So students enjoy this activity, and I refer back to it as the course goes on. Think about what you felt like when we were doing this before. I only have 1 minute left. Wow, okay. This isn't like teaching class at all. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to take the techniques I learned about in the FDI, mainly this design thinking approach and the role-playing exercise that we did for historical simulations, and turn them into some kind of coherent game. I'm going to skip over all the implementation slides, which are colored this other color, and just go to the final part. Okay. Which is that this is an effective thing to do on the first day. It accomplished basically all the secondary goals. It was a little bit harder to accomplish the learning outcomes because all the students were doing different things in their individual groups. It was hard to have them have exactly the same learning experience. This is what Lorraine was talking about. So we have to let it go a little bit. We can't ensure that everyone learns everything. But we can, as the students are working in their groups or working on having the final discussion, we can focus the conversation, facilitate it towards the things that we're interested in, like ambiguity in rules or consistency in rules, or whether the game is fun based on the rules that described it. I want to make a plug. You can do this with anything, I think. Okay, this is a game design project, but you could have done it with a visual arts project, a poetry project, a literature project. You could do it with data analysis and design, so actually numerical data or physical data or a text or some analysis of a society. You could do this in a lot of different scenarios. You could do it in public policy design. Right? So this isn't just virtue of, I'm teaching a class on game design, so I do this neat game activity. You could do something like this that would be interesting to your students, I think, if you theme it to your particular topic. And I want to end by saying that the Faculty Development Institute was very useful. I'm the most junior member here. That's maybe why I'm not doing the right timing here. But I really appreciate, I want to echo what President Harris said before. So I went to an R1. We had no pedagogy training at all. If you wanted to know how to teach, well, they put you in a room with students and let nature happen, I guess, as they say. That's probably not what they say, but that's not what I meant. They put you in a room and you talk to students and you learn how to teach, okay? But here it was really nice to have a venue that students where you could learn about pedagogy from experts and also learn about it from my more senior colleagues. Right? I thought that was really useful. So I hope the Faculty Development Institute and things like it continue. Thank you. Sorry for going over, Denise.